And man, I am so excited about today. We've been looking forward to this for quite some time, and I'll just kind of set this up. We are glad to have with us Representative Josh Williams and his wife Niera. They're here today. Let's welcome them. So, kind of a cool story. So, my brother was at a meeting in Columbus about the expansion of Ed Choice and some of the things that were happening along those lines. They have a school in Dayton, and so they were down there for a meeting. And my brother got out of the meeting, and he called me, and he said, "Bro, you have got to connect with this Josh Williams guy." He said in this meeting, they had several different speakers, and he said, "I'm telling you, the sharpest guy in the whole deal was Representative Williams. He's your representative. You need to connect with him." And so I just reached out on your website, just sent a message, and to be quite honest, I mean, nothing against you. I just didn't expect a response right away and didn't know what would happen. And your assistant reached out like right away, and we invited you to come. You came. You looked at our school, looked at our daycare, and I just want to say I appreciate that. Thank you for responding to that. We're excited to have you here. Can we welcome the Williams to FAC today? All right, so we'll get into some different things, but I want to start today. I just want to hear from you. I want to hear about who you are. You have an amazing story, unbelievable story. So I want you just to share a little bit about, and maybe even just back up a little bit, kind of your upbringing, your family, and then we want to get into, man, you've had an interesting last 15 years or so. So we want to get into that and kind of talk about that, how God's worked through that in you. But just share with us a little bit about you and your family.
Sure. So I was born and raised here in Toledo, Ohio, in the inner city. At the time that I was born, my dad was 68 and my mom was 26.
Oh.
So Dad had it going on a little bit. But my father was a reverend. We were raised in the church, Baptist, and he passed away when I was 5 years old from cancer. So my dad is black, my mom's Native American and white. So my mom was left to raise myself and my two siblings, my two older siblings. So as a single mother, we lived in poverty in the inner city, pretty bad conditions. And eventually we made our way out to Old Orchard area next to the University of Toledo. And that's where I spent most of my teenage years and upbringing. And eventually went to start high school, where we'll talk about it, where I ended up dropping out of high school as a senior. So, I mean, as a young kid, we really struggled. I mean, I lived at 21st and Brookwood, which was near the corner of Collingwood and Monroe. And our living conditions were so bad that at the age of 5, I had dead roaches surgically removed from my ears. So I have hearing loss for the rest of my life, a central auditory processing disorder, where I have damage to my ears because of how many hearing infections I had. So it's kind of a weird story, but so certain pitches in voice, when you get a certain distance, I can't comprehend. My brain doesn't work reading what you say, so I stare at your lips a lot in order to get a reference point. And my beautiful wife, Niera, has figured that out. So she when we argue, she'll turn her back to me and walk away, and I'm like, I can't hear you. She's kind of figured out the cheat code. But, we overcame, and after my father passed away, I think at the age of 8 is when we moved out to the University of Toledo area, and we were raised in an apartment complex out there called Kenwell Gardens. Now I think it's called Flats of Douglas now. And I went to DeVoe. I went to START. I was an honor student. I overcame. And as a senior, when I turned 18 as a junior, so I was out on my own as a senior, I couldn't afford to pay bills, and eventually I became homeless. And I spent about 6 months sleeping on park benches and on friends' couches until I met my first wife, and she gave birth to my son. And that was around the time that I fell and got injured.
Man, it's amazing. Growing up, similar. I grew up with single mom most of my life. What are some things that you feel like that you learned through that season? Because I've always said, like, okay, you're in government. If we want to solve government financial issues, let the single moms get in there. They'll figure it out, right? What are some things that you feel like you learned through that season, the difficult season, growing up, losing your dad, being raised by a single mom? What were some of the important lessons you learned?
Well, some of it was very early on. I was taught the character traits that are needed to overcome adversity. And then there was portions of learning how to tighten the belt. You know, I remember, you know, being a young kid wanting all these video games and things for Christmas and knowing that my mom, you know, a single mother that's struggling, would put the Finger Hut magazine in front of me. And she would say, this is my limit, and anything in this Finger Hut magazine you can order up to this limit because you could pay monthly on it. And that was my normal Christmas. Everything came out of the Finger Hut magazine, and we paid for it throughout the year. But later on, you know, so at the age of 18, after I dropped out, the mother of my son was pregnant with Matthew, my 19-year-old son now. I started working for the railroad next to the Jeep plant. And at the age of 21, I fell 30 feet and destroyed my spine. So at 21, with her being 9 months pregnant, I kind of forced myself to go back to work because I had to provide for my young family. And my son was born, and I struggled through trying to continue to work even though I was trying to get treatment. And I remember at the age of 23, I came home from a 12-hour shift working for the railroad, and I fell asleep on the couch and took a nap. I was pretty tired. And when I woke up, I couldn't feel my legs. And we called, you know, the emergency squad, and I was taken to Toledo Hospital. And we did tests, and it was determined then that I needed emergency back surgery. So in December of 2007, I had my first back surgery. Or December of 2007, I went on disability. January 8th of 2008, I had my first back surgery. After that, I was never the same. I had a second back surgery in May of 2008. And from that point forward, for 2 years, I really didn't get out of bed. I laid in bed for 2 consecutive years. I blew up in weight. At my heaviest, I was 458 pounds. Doctors told me I would never walk again without the assistance of a cane or a walker, and I gave up, right? And this is what I came to talk to you guys about today. So I gave up. And normally I give you the full story and then I back up to this point, but I'm going to stop right here for a moment. So in 2009, I had seen every surgeon in Toledo. There's 3 main groups: University of Toledo, St. Vincent's, and UTMC in Toledo Hospital. And I'd seen all of them, and they all told me the same thing. Get used to being in the bed. Here's some medications to deal with the pain, and this is your life. And in 2009, I made arrangements for the mother of my son to take my kids, my son and my 2 stepkids, to Meyer. And I sat on the edge of my bed with my gun, and I planned on killing myself. I had given up. I had lost all hope, right? There was times during that period where I even cursed God about it. You know, why me? I used to scream to him. Why'd I have to go through all of this? Why'd I have to be, you know, a poor kid growing up? Why'd I have to be raised by a single mother? Why'd my dad have to die? Why'd I have to be raised in poverty? Why'd I have to drop out of high school? Why'd I have to fall? Why me? I used to scream to him. And in that moment, my 3-year-old son walked in the room. Something had told my ex-wife to leave him behind. She couldn't explain it, but something had told her to leave him behind. I hadn't picked him up physically in over a year. I couldn't care for him on my own. I was bedridden. And I'll be vulnerable. I mean, I was bedridden to the point where I used to have to use the restroom in plastic urinals next to my bed and listen to my ex-wife and my kids gag as they dumped it in the toilet. Like, I was hopeless in that moment. Yeah. And he sent in my 3-year-old, and I tucked my gun away and I cried. And, you know, when she came back, I had some pretty coarse words for her for leaving him behind. And in that moment, God just shifted my mindset. In that moment, I went from, you know, screaming, why me, to asking him, why not me? Why couldn't I overcome this? And I prayed to him, and I said, if you give me the path forward, you show me what I'm supposed to do to get out of this bed, I promise you I'll put the hard work and determination in. And almost instantaneously, 2 days later, I had an examination through BWC, and on the elevator, an old black lady saw me standing there with a back brace on, and she said, are you going up to the BWC? And I said, yes. And she said, well, do you have an attorney? I said, no, I don't. She said, oh, they're going to screw you over up there because they're going to do all this and do that. You need an attorney. Here's my attorney's number. And it was John Palafka, who is still my attorney to this day. A few weeks later, I went to take my son to get a sports physical, and I met this amazing chiropractor. He saw me in my back brace, and he came out and he sat down. And he said, why are you here? I said, I'm here to have a sports physical for my son. He said, no, why are you here with that back brace on? Why aren't you getting treated? I said, I've done chiropractic before. It didn't work. He said, something told me to come and talk to you. I will treat you for free if I can't get it approved through your insurance. Wow. And that's Michael Jajuga. He's still a mentor and friend of me now. And looking back on those times, you know, in the moment I didn't know, but looking back on those times, just like God sent one of his foot soldiers in to stop me from killing myself, he was sending more of his foot soldiers into my corner.
Amazing.
To help me overcome. And I didn't see it in the moment. So from 2008 to 2010, I laid in bed. I met Dr. Jajuga in 2009. He's the one that convinced me to go to Cleveland, where I had my next 2 back surgeries in 2010. I had an artificial disc put in 2012. I had a full fusion of my spine to my pelvis. I was so big, they fused the front and the back. They normally do one or the other. 2013, I had weight loss surgery and lost 200 pounds. And at the age of 29, I felt healthy enough to get out of bed. And I wanted to be an example to my kids. And talking to my lawyer, John Palafka, he was the one that convinced me, hey, you should go to college and be a paralegal. You've learned the workers' comp system so well that if you got a 2-year degree, I would hire you. Any lawyer around here would hire you. And that's where the next phase started in my life, where I thought I was going to just get approval to go to college. But come to find out, in government, if you're a disabled worker in Toledo or in Ohio, and you're on workers' comp, if you enroll in college, they cut you off for your disability. Oh. Because they say if you can go to class for 8 hours a day, you can work for 8 hours a day, you don't need our help. Oh, my goodness. So we fought the government for over a year, and eventually they allowed me to go to college and maintain my disability for 2 years. Opportunities for Ohioans with disabilities paid for my tuition and books. And I enrolled in college at UT at the age of 30, and at the age of 35, I was graduating from law school with 3 degrees.
It's amazing. So amazing. It's amazing how, listen to you tell the story, you know, when you reach out and you make that prayer, how God starts orchestrating and putting things into place and bringing people into your life. There's no way that you could make that happen. To do that. So in those moments, like what was, obviously, I mean, it's easy to tell the story, right? Like you just, like, here's the dates and whatever, but man, that's a long journey. And I'm sure there was a wide range of emotions and feelings. Were there ever moments where you feel like, man, I don't know if I can make this. I don't know if I can get through this. How did you persevere? Because going to college, right? Going to college is not easy for anybody. You've got the physical stuff and you're getting better through that. But like, man, just the attitude and the mindset of perseverance is such a needed thing in our world today. I mean, I don't want to disparage anybody, but we have such a victim mentality in our world, and everybody's looking for somebody to blame. What got you through those hard moments, the hard days? Because it's easy now to look back and be like, man, dude, God was in this, and look at how he ordered these steps. But there's a lot of days where I'm sure you didn't know where it was going to end up, right? So tell us about that.
So there's 2 things that I attributed to it, and I don't put them in any particular order. One is my upbringing, right? All the struggles that I had to overcome, it gave you a survivalist mentality, right? There was no one I could run to for help. I just had to persevere, and it put certain character traits in me, but most importantly, it was my faith in my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, because I look at my life, and I look at how God can put down a path for you as I'm walking through the forest, right? And there's a game trail, right? God laid down a path for me. It's a little bit easier. There's still going to be hills. There's still going to be valleys. There's still going to be rain and snowstorms. Right? It's still going to be a difficult journey to walk down the path and reach the destination that God had for you. But when you venture off on your own agenda, when you get off that path, you're running into bushes and branches and trees and wild animals you never should have experienced. You may be able to find your way to the destination He had for you, but you're going to have way more scars. You're going to have way more hardship. So when I look at my life, I always try to figure out if I'm on God's path or not. And I can always tell what He has for me, not because it's easy, because I don't want a challenge. I love a challenge, but because I can just feel when I fall off His path. And when I was in college and it became difficult, things became difficult. It was easy going for me. I went through a divorce when I was in law school, and I was considering dropping out of law school. My ex-wife was using the fact that I was taking 2 night classes as that I couldn't provide for my son, and I'm the type of man I wasn't going to give up custody of my son. And going through that divorce, I went to my family, and I went to my doctor, and I even went to my beautiful wife, Niera, and we were dating and getting ready to be engaged, and I said, I'm thinking about dropping out of law school. And she said, no, you're not. And I said, well, she's trying to use the fact I'm not going to be at home at night, with my son. And she said, that's fine, I'll be there. And then my doctor, Jajuga, he said, I'll drive from Michigan and watch him. Wow. Go to court and tell him they don't need to worry about that. Wow. Right? The people that stepped forward to make sure that I stayed on that path, and then when I was going to college, I needed the signature of Michael Jajuga, my doctor, to say that I was physically fit to go to college. And he told me, I won't sign this document unless you promise me you're going to go to law school and become a lawyer. I told him, I said, you're crazy. You're crazy. I'm 30 years old. That takes 7 years. I'm just trying to go get this 2-year degree so I can make $30,000, $40,000 a year and provide for my family. He said, I'm not signing that document unless you promise me you won't stop until you go to law school. And I said, I'll make you the promise that as long as it's paid for, I'll keep going. And in that second year of law school, when I was getting ready to quit, he said, no, remember you shook my hand. Right? Remember God put me in your life. You made a promise. And I cried about it. When I think back on it, I cry a lot about it, especially when I'm in the church. Because how much God has blessed me is so amazing when I look back and I reflect on it, right? Yeah. I used to think of those experiences I had as a child and a young man as weights that was holding me down, drowning me in this society. And now I look back and I realize those were weights, but they weren't holding me down. They were making me stronger. Yes. Because see, God was preparing me for an assignment that only I could accomplish. He needed someone strong and determined that had overcome, that wouldn't give in when a margin of society calls me a bigot or a racist or a Nazi for believing that boys shouldn't be in girls' locker rooms or it takes a strong person to stand up to that online trolling and bullying and screaming in my face in committees. And he gave me such a perseverance and such an assignment that I believe I'm doing God's work. That's how I got into government. I became a lawyer. I was 4 months away from getting married to this beautiful woman. She laughed. She knows this story. I was 4 months away from getting married. We were engaged. The wedding was set. We were paying for everything you can think of. And I walked in and I told my wife, my fiance at the time, I don't want to be a lawyer anymore. And she said, why? I said, there's this emptiness sitting inside of me. I overcame all of this. I got a beautiful son that's getting ready to graduate. I got a beautiful wife. I own a beautiful house in Oregon. I should be happy and ecstatic. And I had this emptiness inside of me. I feel like I'm profiting off of a bad system as a lawyer. And my wife at the time, she said, we got a wedding to pay for. Suck it up, buttercup.
That's a good woman right there.
And I did. I kept working, and we got married, and we went on our honeymoon in beautiful Mexico, and I came back, and I kept working, and this emptiness continued to be there. I had started teaching. I used to coach kids. Like, I give back. I'm trying to find what the assignment is. And just like when I was ready to commit suicide, And my son walked in, and I prayed to him about giving me the path forward. In that moment, I went back to prayer. And I said, Lord, there's this emptiness inside of me. I need to know what your assignment is for me because I feel like this isn't it. I know you wanted me to become a lawyer, but I don't know if this is what you got planned. I'm praying to you again, put the right people in my way and show me the assignment. And almost instantaneously, I had people talking to me about politics. They came and they said, we heard you want to run for office. I said, no, you didn't. No, you didn't. You know, I just overcame. I'm supposed to be generating money for my family and building up my retirement. I have zero money in my savings. I'm not trying to give this career up to go into politics. And it just kept happening and happening. So I talked to some friends, and I said, I don't even know what this assignment is, but I think it's political. And we talked behind closed doors, and they said, oh, I think you ought to run for state representative. I said, well, that's a legislator. Yeah, that would make sense, but I wouldn't even know where to start because I'm not affiliated with any party. I'm a conservative Christian. I stayed an independent because I'm not a party affiliate. And they said, well, go talk to Judge Corey. And I met with Judge Corey at the bench because I practice in her court. I asked her to approach, and I said, Your Honor, on a different subject, I'm thinking about running for office. And she said, which judgeship? And I said, I can't be a judge. I've only been practicing for 2 years. She said, oh, you seem, like you've been around for a long time. And I said, but I'm thinking about state representative. And she said, okay, meet me for dinner. And we met, and there was 15 people in the room. And this is the weirdest story. These people surround me, and they just start quizzing me. What is your belief on this? What do you stand on taxes? How do you stand? And I'm giving all my true answers, and they, oh, okay. And they walk away, and it looked like a football huddle on Sunday. Since it's Sunday, 15 people got in the corner, and they're all talking. I'm sitting by myself. I'm like, what just happened? And they came back, and they said, you're running for this seat. This is your opponent. These are your 5 main donors. You need to, and I'm like, whoa, wait a second. I got to go talk to my wife. And they said, well, the petitions are due in like 3 days. We need to know. So I went home and I talked to my wife, and I thought I was going to get the same answer that I got about not being a lawyer anymore. And I went home and I said, babe, I'm thinking about going into politics. And I'm thinking about running for state representative. And of course, my wife said, well, what is that? I explained to her what the position was, and I said, and there's one more thing. I'm running as a Republican. And she said, really? She knew my beliefs. And she said, do you think they'll support you? And I said, absolutely. And she said, well, I'd be disappointed if you didn't. She said, it's not every day people that look like us get an opportunity like this. And it's not every day people like us get an opportunity inside of that party. So if 1, you promise me you'll make time for your son and I, 2, you continue your career in law, and you get the support of your party, I'm behind you. And that day we drove down to Columbus, and I met with party affiliates and got screened again. And by the time I was driving home, it was already announced here I was a candidate. And so you have to sign a petition to get 50 people to sign. I had 75 people's numbers and addresses for me to go and get their signatures. And that's how I ran my first time in the legislature. And when I got elected, I ran in 22, and when I got sworn in 2023, January 6th of 2023, I became the first black Republican elected to the Ohio House in 50 years. And I worked my tail off. I'm the #1 ranked Republican in the House on bills sponsored and co-sponsored. I'm the #2 Republican in the entire state legislature next to Jerry Serino. I worked very hard, and my colleagues recognized that. And in January of 2025, just 2 years later, I'll be sworn in as the first black majority whip in Ohio's history, regardless of party.
Dude, that's awesome.
And I'm unapologetically Christian. I carry him with me in every room, every meeting, right? So I tell my colleagues, one of my favorite songs now, and my wife says, is God Only Knows. And every time I listen to that song, it means something more to me. Because people, like when we're having conversations like this, they say, well, what was it like being there in that room in a pit of despair, ready to blow your head off. And God only knows. How did you overcome all of that and reach where you are today? God only knows. Can you tell us what it was like? I can't explain it in words because he only knows. And then there's a part of the song that talks about he only knows what you've gone through. He only knows what you've overcome. God is the only person that knows all of my flaws. God is the only person that knows all of my sins. God is the only person that knows everything I've come to him for redemption for. And he still loves me. And that is a love only God knows.
So good. It's so good. Man, what an amazing story. And I could tell, so Representative Williams, who was overwhelmingly reelected for the 44th district. Isn't that awesome? Thankful for that. Election night, I was watching the numbers, and, they come in weird, and it was like a close race. I'm like, this can't be close. No way. And then all of a sudden, it all changed. I'm like, oh, there we go. Now we're good. But, so Representative Williams came, and we invited him to come and look at ACA, because that's been a big passion of yours, is charter schools and private schools and funding for private schools. We'll talk about that just in a minute. And then we went over. He asked to go look at our daycare, which we're pretty proud of. First Steps and all the things that happen with First Steps. They do an amazing work there. And we've got a spot reserved for future Williams. We've got a spot reserved for them, so we're good to go there. But you and I sat out. We stood outside and started talking, and man, I could just feel the passion. The church can tell you I'm a little bit of a passionate guy. And so as we started talking, I could feel your passion. I could feel your passion about the things of God, about God's purpose. What I'm hearing through all of this conversation today is none of the things that happen in your life were accidental. One of the things we've talked a lot about around here is one of the worst theologies you can have is to say, well, that everything happened for a reason. Okay? It's bad theology. It's not so much everything happens for a reason. Here's the promise that we have, is that God takes the things that happen, like the things that you went through, and the promise we have as believers is all things work together for good. God takes the garbage, the junk, the bad stuff, the horrible things, and God uses it for good. I was thinking as you're talking there, when I first got into ministry, I felt very insecure because I came from poverty. I came from a broken home. And, all of my buddies were pastors' kids, and they lived, well, I thought they lived like really privileged lives. What do they know? They'd never had a problem in their life and whatever, And I felt like, who am I? Who am I to be in this role in ministry and as a pastor? And I was teaching a youth class one day, and 25 students. And out of 25 students, I said, how many of you come from a broken home? And out of 25 students, 23 raised their hands. A brother and a sister were in that class, and they were the only kids whose parents were still together. And I felt like the Lord spoke to me in that moment, and the Lord said, I'm going to use you to be able to speak to this generation. God uses, we want everything to be perfect, but what I'm hearing today is so much passion, because you see God took what could have been your destruction, and God's turned it into an amazing story of redemption and hope. And come on, somebody. We ought to be inspired today. Inspired, not just because of somebody who's obviously very strong and intelligent and got a lot of things going for him, but because of somebody that recognizes if it had not been for Jesus, if it had not been for the Lord, there's no telling where we would be. So, man, thank you for sharing this testimony. I'm strengthened and encouraged. So let's talk politics. No, not politics.
Let's talk politics.
But why do you feel God put you in politics? Obviously, you're breaking, things that have never been done before, which is an amazing story, an amazing testimony. But bro, that's a hard deal. The environment that we're in, you talk about being called all kinds of names. You know, no longer is it okay just to disagree on things. If you hold a position that's different than mine, now, like literally, we're living in a world where people are saying, if you voted for a certain candidate, don't invite them over for Thanksgiving and Christmas. That's the crazy world that we live in. You're jumping right into the middle of that fire. Why do you feel like God put you there?
I believe God put me into politics because he knows me better than anyone else. He knows everything that I overcame, and he knows the mentality that it gave me. And it's a I don't care attitude when I get opposition to some, because I know what my assignment is. Yeah. So you can't sway me. I'll give you an example. In politics, lobbyists donate to campaigns. We all know this, right? Right? Candidates need to fund their races. My first race cost $750,000.
Oh my goodness.
For a position that pays a $67,000 salary.
That seems about right.
Seems about right. Right, this race didn't cost as much. So lobbyists will donate to your campaigns, and then when Columbus comes, and it's not just lobbyists, there's organizations as well, when a vote comes up, they'll come and they'll remind you that they voted to support you, or they'll remind you that you were endorsed by their organization as a slight way of telling you the way that you should vote. Yeah. Lobbyists learned about me very early on in Columbus that I don't care. Because I believe God put me here, not you. Yeah. Yeah. See, that's the distinction. Yeah. So people believe in the separation of church and state, but they need to realize this nation was founded on faith. Yeah. Absolutely. And no matter how much the government wants to remove it from our lives, right? And we only have a few minutes left. I can go on a long tangent about how the government intentionally dissolved the nuclear family and made single motherhood the norm and removed the husband out of the household and made you relying on government and for free things. So then the government becomes your savior instead of Christ. That's all planned. And that's why, as a man of faith, I love being in the legislature, because I see that I have the chance to bring policies that are forward, that are rooted in my faith, my morals, and my beliefs that I get from Christ. And I can do it with the brilliant mind, and I don't mean that egotistically, the brilliant mind that he gave me to go into law, to understand legislation, know how to read statutes, and I can get the same result without saying the reason I'm doing it is because I'm forcing my faith down your throat. I can do it with logic and reason that he's given me, and that's a benefit that I think. And that's why I'm so passionate about being in politics, because we have to undo what the government tried to do to us, right? And if we're not going to do it as Christians, who you think is going to do it for us? So, people believe Christians have no role in government, but you have to understand, God said in Romans that every authority placed on earth is placed there by me, right? So that means he put me here. And also understand that the devil got some people working down there too. So if we want policies that we believe in, we need to go and push it. And I'm unapologetic about what I introduce. I'm a huge proponent of school choice when it comes to our private institutions and our 08 schools like the school here. I'm a huge supporter of them. I'm a former charter board president of a charter school. I believe parents have the right to educate their children as they see fit. I'm a huge supporter of LifeWise and our release time for religious instruction, because I believe even though your child's enrolled in public school, there is still a point in time where the parents should allow for religious instruction. And if we do it off school grounds, it shouldn't be in the school's business. Yeah. Right? I believe in the traditional family values that this country was founded on. I believe that the best way to drag somebody out of poverty is a two-parent household. Right? A man and woman.
Statistics show that very clear.
Right. And I gave a message at our church, River of Life, on Father's Day. And I encourage you to go look it up on my YouTube page and my campaign page about how a true reflection of God's image is the man and woman standing at the head of the household. Yeah. Right? God made Adam, but from Adam he made woman. That means Adam was made in the image of God, and he removed woman from inside of Adam. That means both of them together is the only way you get an accurate reflection of God.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So you have to have man and woman at the head of the household. You have to have that as the foundation of our nation. You have to have them unified in marriage under Christ. And you have to give children the opportunity to be the best version of themselves through a good education. You know, I don't believe that any adult in our society should be taking kids to a drag queen performance. Right. So I introduced the bill based on that. I have 40 co-sponsors based on that bill, and it didn't move in this General Assembly. I don't understand why, but I've been called a bigot. I've been called homophobe and transphobe. They had a banner saying "N. Josh Williams" at the gay pride event here in Toledo. And you know what? I don't care. You know, we've gotten to a point where we can either, in a room like this is the way I view society. In a room like this, let's say we have, I know there's more than 100, but let's say we have 100 people. If 10 people stand up screaming on a certain subject, and 3 of us scream in opposition, they believe that the 90 members of the room sided with the 10, and that the 3 are bigots. Yeah. What they don't realize is the 90% just didn't want to be vocal because they didn't want to be ostracized by the 10%. They didn't want to be trolled online by the 10%. Sure. They didn't want to be called bad names. But this Christian foundation of our nation is sitting silent as a small majority scream in the megaphone about what they believe society should be. And because we're silent, they think the majority sits with them. And one political party ran on that this last election cycle. And another political party ran on faith, jobs, security, and whether or not we like one potential candidate that can be a little extra. But across the entire nation, we saw a wave of people towards regular policies instead of wokeness. And as Christians, we have to get more involved and more engaged. If you want your politician to reflect your views, you have to get engaged in politics. If you want your school to reflect your views, you got to go to the school board meetings. If you want your county commissioners to put in policies that affect you right at home, you need to go to the county commissioners meetings. What are you sitting on a couch for after work because you had a long day? I used to go to work, come home, coach kids and mentor them. I used to read for school the next day in a bathtub that I would not put any hot water in after the first round because it'd keep me awake. That's how I studied for law school. I still was coaching, right? While I was studying for the bar exam, I went and started teaching at Adrian College because every moment I have in my life now is a moment that I can do something with it. I sat in a bed for 6 years with the curtains drawn, giving up for 6 years. You don't understand how long that is. The only person that can understand that is somebody that sat in solitary confinement in prison for 6 years. I ate in that bed. I slept in that bed, right? I mentored and tutored my kids in that bed for 6 years. And now that I'm out of it, there's not a moment of my life I'm going to waste.
I love it. I love it. Our media team's going to get mad, but man, this is too good just because the time stops us. So we'll go a little long today, and that's okay because I want to give you plenty of time. Is that all right? And if people are watching and they get mad, they should have been here. You know what I'm saying? Like, they can't get mad about it. Man, I love what you're saying. As you're talking, I was thinking about, you know, we've talked here, and what we talk about is like, you know, we don't promote a party or whatever. We promote values. What are the values? And I love what you said, because if you look at the last, 150 years of this nation. There's been a definite attack against the values that this nation was founded on. Monkey Scope's trial. Why? What was that? That was trying to remove the idea that God was the creator. Roe versus Wade, God's the giver of life. The Obergefell case, what was that? Marriage is between one man and one woman, husband and wife. God ordained it that way. Now we're getting into what is a man, what is a woman, right? The documentary, What is a Woman? The definition. God created, in the beginning, God created male and female. This is not accidental. This is a clear agenda and a clear strategy to try to extract out God's design. And actually, my message, we're doing a sermon series called the Better Way. Everything about Jesus is the better way. As the church, our job, God puts people like Representative Williams in places to be able to influence wherever we are. Our responsibility is to demonstrate and to reflect the better way of Jesus. We're not against boys competing in girls' sports because we're transphobic or because we're, hate mongers or whatever. We're doing that because we believe that the better way of Jesus is for that boy to find his identity in Jesus as a boy. He's never going to feel fulfilled trying to live in a gender that was not God's design and God's creation. He'll never find that. So that's not a message of hate. That's a message of love. That's a message of hope to people. So I love what you're doing. I love the fight. I love that attitude, right? Like, you have to be tough. And I believe as Christians, one of the things we've been very blessed over the years that we've not faced real persecution. And can we just have real talk for a minute? The reality is the church is really soft. Church is really soft. I was raised by a coach. There is no, I don't care how bad you hurt. The person that wins is not the most talented person. It's the person that's willing to push past the pain. And if the church is going to be the light in this generation, we've got to have a very high pain tolerance and not be moved by accusations or moved by any of that. Just stand true and stand strong.